What does that sound I hear? Is that the sound of music? Why, it is. I wonder who's singing. Is that you, Pat?
No, I don't hear any. There's nobody singing in my end.
I just have a bit of music in our house now. I have a funny feeling I recognize the sound of those people, the sound that
Uh,
that band makes. And in fact, I think I
uh,
can say the lyrics for the whole thing. Anyway,
uh,
anyway, wait, apart from music, let's talk about more important things. Has the winter freeze broken in Donegal? Are you warm this morning?
Absolutely. Yeah, Jude, I'm sitting here this morning, and for the first morning in about, I think, a fortnight, I don't have the heat on. There's no need for it this morning. I'm
Hmm.
quite warm sitting here. Jesus, Jude, what was it last -8 or something?
Oh yeah, those places was way down. I think it was some parts of Ireland was down to something like 15 or 17 or something. Anyway,
Uh,
thank God for small mercies is all I can say. Pat, you are interested in the story of a woman called Crockett. Is that the name?
yeah,
Crockett?
Jude. Here's the thing. I was sitting watching. No, I have a wee bit of a personal interest. I know this woman who some years back, and by the way, an absolutely lovely woman, who said to me when she heard there's. Let me fill you in. Sister Claire Crockett is a nun from Derry who was died in Ecuador a couple of years back. I can't remember how long ago it was. She was teaching children music when nearly an eight, 7.8, whatever that is on a earthquake hit, and the school collapsed, and she was trying to lead kids to safety when she died. Now the funny thing is, people who knew Claire Crockett were going, "You're kidding, Claire Saint." Apparently, she drank, she smoked, she partied, she loved the good life, etc., etc., etc. And I saw yesterday her sister, whose name is Gill, I don't remember her first name. She says, "Never in a million years did we think our Claire would become a nun, much less be on the road to sainthood." But anyway, what I'm getting to, in November, she was nominated or designated a servant of God, which I think there's four steps to becoming a saint. This is the
Mhm.
first one. And her sister sort of says, "My God," sort of thing, "we never believed this about Claire." But
Mhm.
you know that, and I was chatting to a girl some years ago, as I want to start out here, saying she said that Claire Crockett, not a hope and all the rest. I knew Claire, and she was a wild woman, she was all this rest.
Yeah.
But here's the point that I'm getting to. Is it true that a lot of time the people who are saints are the very people who started off a life of almost the opposite? You know, what I'm thinking of and going through my head is, remember Oscar Schindler, no Schindler's List, the
Oh
famous,
yes,
who
yes.
said, apparently he was a con man. He liked the women, he drank too much and all the rest of it. But
Mhm.
when all the good Christian conservative Germans were doing bugger all to help anybody, he was risking his life. So
Yeah.
is there something in that sort of type of person that they
Yeah.
switch or whatever? First of all, here's the first question I'm going to ask you: do you believe such a thing, that there are saints, that that there is a heaven, that this is, or are we manifesting on someone else? The wish for sainthood.
I do believe in an afterlife, and I do believe in happiness. Total happiness with God. With regard to sainthood, that is a characteristic of many of them. You remember Saint Augustine's famous phrase, like he
Yeah,
led a wild life and said, Lord, make me chaste, but not yet."
yeah,
So, many of them would have been sort of wild. I have a little thing. I'm delighted for that woman and her family that they're getting this sort of sense of her life being rewarded by sainthood. But at the same time, I think it reminds me a little bit of people getting medals pinned on their chest. And I mean, you and I know people, maybe in your own family, who have died, your parents or grandparents or whatever. And they were good people. And if there is an
yeah,
afterlife and if there is a God who rewards good people, you know that they're in heaven as sure as the this woman Crockett is there. I'm a wee
yeah,
bit leery about the whole idea of saints because I know Protestants find that hard to deal with saints, and I do too, to an extent. I mean, if you're going to pray to God, pray to God. Like my mother named me Jude because I was the
yeah,
last of eight children, and she'd been told not to have any more children. And I came
yeah.
at the very after a sort of lag at the end, and she pretty said Jude that I would survive and she would survive. But I don't know. I think. going the roundabout route may be understandable, but it's not something I'd commend. And it's great that people are very good and done such good work, but I'm not sure that I think of, nominating them saints and saying that this number of miracles have been attributed to them, so now we can call them a saint. A wee bit iffy about that. How
Yeah,
about you?
no, someone I find good God, let me get it on the record. I'm an agnostic, dude. I sincerely hope there's a God. I really genuinely hope there's a God, and I hope that wee girl, if there's a God and she's done all these sort of things, that she's made a saint.
Hmm.
We all need sort of role models in this life, and
Yeah.
there's something about her that does seem to have struck a chord with me in the sense that she's not the Holy Joe. She wasn't running to the altar as a young, but they said it was someone on Good Friday one. She went to a church or something and something she turned around and says something I've got to change my life type thing. And
Hmm.
someone I think metamorphosis is the wrong word, but whatever that term is,
Yeah,
to
it is.
change your life around so much, she did it, and she was 33 when she died, and she was sitting teaching these kids music when the earthquake struck on I couldn't remember the name, the Richter scale,
Yeah.
7.8 in the Richter scale. That's the term I was looking for.
Hmm.
So, Jude, sure, our life meant something. But it's
Ah.
just an interesting thing because I was watching it on RT yesterday and thought, was it something, in the modern world, we become very cynical. So I was wondering what were your views on it were.
Well, I think it's kind of wonderful to see people whose lives have some meaning and, who work for some cause that's outside themselves. I find that quite inspiring. If you take something like that, what do you call that Jesuit priest that set up all those places for the homeless in the south, and
Oh God,
there's now,
brother, and Dublin, yeah.
I forgot his.
And what do you call him? God, Jesus, he's from the north.
He is.
Yeah,
He's from Uri or somewhere. But
McVeary,
anyway,
Peter
I
McVeary.
saw Peter McVeigh. Yeah. There's a man, who clearly has spent a life doing good and supporting
Yeah,
others. And then in the end, if you can say that, I have supported even a few people, maybe even just
yeah,
your own family. I think that's good. I also think that sharing with other people does tend to take you out of yourself and sort of make you good. When you focus on other people, there's people that forever focusing on themselves and saying, "Oh,
yeah,
I'm worried about this, and I'm just my weight's too much, or I'm so concerned I have a new job." People that go on about themselves forever. If you go looking for sympathy, you'll not get it. Forget about
yeah,
yourself. Just think about other people and see what the difference is. That'd be
yeah.
my view.
Okay,
I,
no,
I,
no, just running that by you.
I say all that as a potential sin myself. Okay, let's go to slightly less elevated topics. Oh God, we're back to this kind of thing. At the weekend, Matt Carthy of Sinn Féin, he's one of the top guys in the Dáil. He was in Castleblinny and he unveiled a memorial, I think, or he spoke at a memorial for a guy called John Francis Green. Now, John
Yeah,
Francis Green is not of the names familiar, but he's one of many. He was killed, I think it was 1975, and the circumstances of his killing were shrouded, as Matt Carthy said, in secrecy and unanswered questions that still linger half a century later. It's the old story. The Glenanne gang, which killed over 120 people, Catholics,
mm,
many of them with no Republican connections of any kind. In fact, some of them were SDLP people. But they were seen as we were talking about people in England getting ahead. These were people who were seen as getting ahead in life. And they killed them. They killed them.
yeah,
And they did it in collusion with British forces. And Matt Carthy says the British government cannot be allowed to continue hiding behind the veil of secrecy. Well, all I can say to that is, do you want to bet, Matt? You want to bet they won't continue hiding behind a veil of secrecy? I think they certainly will. What do you think?
yeah. Anne Cadwallader, she was a very good journalist. She worked for
Yes,
the now defunct Irish Press.
I
She wrote a book called about 20 years ago or 15 years ago called Lethal Allies,
I have it. Yes, yes.
where it was a forensic sort of examination of, and Jude, it was an open and shut case. the authority, she produced evidence right, left, and centre of collusion. And even guys getting stopped coming after we'll call it an execution at a farm. Boys from, I think, Portadown, and they all had mud on their feet, and the cops didn't even bother. Like, if you're walking down the street and Portadown, where do you get all the muck on your feet? They
Uh,
didn't even bother stopping them. It was open and shut where they'd come from after killing, an assassination. But anyway, there's all that sort of stuff like that. And you're dead right. 120, more than 120 between 19, I think, 72 and 1978. There was collusion right, left, and centre with the loyalists. But there was actually apparently RUC people actually involved directly, feeding information and British intelligence. And you're dead right. The whole idea was to create terror within the Catholic community, that no one was safe. And one of the main guys was a guy called Jackson. He was known as the Jackal. He was a psychopath, total, complete, and utter psychopath. And I think he went into a fish and chip van somewhere in Lurgan or somewhere like that, and he shot a 15-year-old girl and about a 17-year-old girl with no compunction whatsoever because they were
mm,
Catholics.
mm,
Two wee girls who were serving there that evening.
yeah.
So, Jude, there's a legacy there, and this sort of stuff that we get, all the absolute bunkum that we hear about, the British state being the honest broker, and about, the historical inquiries team being too much focused on the activities of the state, not on the terrorists, like, and all the
Mm,
rest of it.
mm,
Dude, the state was up to its eyeballs and hasn't paid a price. As I
mm,
said the last day, as far as I remember, up to 10,000 people from the nationalist community during the course of the Troubles were processed through the courts. I think about 6 soldiers and maybe the same number of RUC men when it was open and shut and they had to do something.
mm. Well, it's a sad tale, but I think many people won't want me to say this, but I think they probably should stop trying to get the answers to that, because there's no way the British are going to reveal what they were doing during the Troubles. I mean, the best you
No.
can hope for is with Derry. Look at Derry. Look at Derry, the 14 people that were killed in Derry. And
Yeah.
Cameron comes on as Prime Minister and says, "We want to say we're sincerely sorry."
Mm,
Forget it. Forget it. That's not
mm,
justice. So those guys that did
mm.
that killing lived their lives. Many of them have probably died of old age now. And that's it.
Yeah.
The people who are
Yeah.
left behind to suffer the loss of a family member, that's tough. They don't care. That's literally
Mm.
speaking, Pat. And as I see it, that is terrorism. It's state terrorism or it's
Yeah.
loyalist terrorism or the combination of the two. Because terrorism consists of putting such fear into the population that they will not
Mm.
support the insurgent group, in this case, the IRA. That was a deliberate strategy. You mightn't like it, but that's the way they were. It was
Yeah.
cruel, it was heartless, and it took many people who were decent people to their deaths, simply so
Mm.
that the rest of the Catholic or nationalist population would be so cowed that they would say, never, no, no, don't. The same
Yeah.
policy is being pursued in Gaza, only there isn't a
Yeah.
collusion there, I don't think. That is to
Mm.
say, put the fear of God into the Palestinians so they'll make sure that they won't support Hamas or anybody else again attacking Israel. Frankly, I think that one's going to be counterproductive. I also think that the doings of the Glenanne gang are counterproductive because I think people are enraged by it, that
Yeah.
ordinary people just picked out and killed, and nobody
Yeah.
answers
But
for it.
I think what's the guy? His name's Murray. I think his name. He's a filmmaker. Was it No Stone Unturned or something?
Oh,
I can't remember
yes.
what it was.
Yes, yes.
I can't. We can't remember what. But he did an analysis of a lot of the killings by the loyalist gangs. And by the way, Jude, there was a pattern. They didn't shoot the Republicans. They shot their brothers and sisters and mothers and so on, and that was deliberate. It was when you look back at it now, and that was a strategy devised by the Brits. In other words, to bring as much pain. The young fellow who went out and joined the IRA didn't kill him, but killed maybe his innocent younger brother. The guy who was not involved, or killed their mother. Like,
Mm,
some of the assassinations, dudes, were absolutely brutal.
mm,
Going up to a lonely farmhouse and some two old people sitting there and they just shot them.
yeah.
It was leaving a message. That was the
Mhm.
sort of thing that had. And Jude, it was without question, a strategy, a policy. And the loyalists were that stupid. They didn't come up with it themselves. There was somebody with a psychology working in the background saying, this is what you do.
Yeah. Sometimes, of course, the IRA was involved in terrible deeds as well, but very often
I'm not disputing
if
yeah,
they're set in a
yeah,
context that make more sense. Like
yeah.
I'm trying to think, what was that? It wasn't Grace Steele? It was somewhere else. Um, you remember Barry Michael Duff got into bother because he uh,
The Kingsmill. Kingsmill.
The Kingsmill massacre, which
Yeah,
was where there
yeah,
was 10 or was it 11 people lined up
yeah,
and they asked, who's a Catholic? The Catholic guy
yeah,
stood for, and he got off, and the rest were killed except one who managed to
yeah.
survive. Which was an appalling thing, and it was a sectarian act. There's no two ways about it.
No, 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 exactly.
But the day before that, or a couple of days before that, there was two families. I forget what their names are now, but there were two families
I
where
the
gunmen went into the home, shot the guys dead as they watched TV or whatever, and then took off. So there was something like
uh,
six Catholics, nationalists
mm,
killed the day before. We never hear that. We never hear that.
no,
You know what? That's as Bernard Devlin says. If somebody punches you in the face, you're fairly likely to want to punch them back, and that's what
yeah,
happens. That's what happens in
mm,
troubles and wars.
yeah.
It's a grim one, but I just think that. Well, I commend Matt Carthy for his efforts to denounce what the British government did, but I do think this notion of saying that he will continue to stop them or remove the veil of secrecy, it's not going to happen, Matt. It ain't going to
Mm,
happen, right?
yeah. I don't think it is. And maybe that should be the main theme about, is there any point trying to get any sort of justice from the British state?
I
Because,
don't believe so.
Jude, they are experts at it. I
Mm.
remember chatting to Martin McGuinness one time when he was going to lead the delegation to negotiate with the Brits. And he says, he admitted that he was nervous to an extent. He says, because these people, he says, are experts
Mm.
at, covering up and, sophistry and anything else,
Yeah,
they will lie to your face and then tell you 2 years later, oh no, you got that wrong.
yeah,
That type of thing.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. Okay, let's move on to another one, Pat. That is such a sad story. This is a pretty sad one too. Michael D. Higgins made a statement over the weekend where he said, at present, science, he was talking about the Young Scientists
Yeah.
competition or whatever, exhibition down in Dublin. And he was talking to him and he said, at present, science is being employed to generate ever more sophisticated weapons and instruments of death and destruction used to generate fear for populations while supporting the insatiable drive of the military industrial complexes for profit. And he cited the figures 2 point, for the ninth year last year, in 2020, no, 2 years ago now, 2023, $2.44 trillion dollars were spent on weaponry, while 200 million people, Megaldy points out, were suffering from hunger.
Mm.
Were you glad that he spoke out, Pat, or would you say he should have kept his mouth shut?
I know me and you have different opinion on this, but I think Michael D is actually the voice of the conscience of this thing, and he speaks in a way that none of our politicians do. Now, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, I personally think it's a good thing. There's some people said that he has no right that it's outside his remit
Oh, yeah.
as president to make. But I agree with him 100%. Jude. Like if you watch, and we're not probably going down the same road again, but if you watch what's happening in Ukraine and Gaza, Jude, a lot of the fighting is not done by boots on the street. The killing is now done by drones and by surgical strikes. By the way, Jude, in Gaza quite recently they wanted one uh, Hamas leader, and there was I think 12 people, and they killed all 12, and
Mm,
so they killed 11 innocent people to get one. Just one. That's one thing.
mm,
Ukraine. Drones are taking out, been attacking people right, left, and center. And remember, Jude, there was Iranian general. The guy he was in. No, where was he? I can't remember where he was. Was he? He was in Iran. Remember? Anyway, the Israelis took him out
mm.
with a drone. In other words, a drone, they had a GPS signal for his car, and
Yeah.
they took him out, in Iranian territory. So, you sort of saying that it's war has become sort of impersonal. very personal to people who die and their families, but not to, there's like they're not being killed by other soldiers. They're being killed now by computer.
Yeah, although to some extent that I agree with you completely. Like there's some guy sitting in a bunker somewhere, maybe in the States even, and he presses a button,
Yeah.
and in the Middle East, a drone goes to work. But I mean, from the Second World War, for example, you've had aircraft where guys were up in the sky and they dropped bombs. They wouldn't see
Yeah.
the bodies, they wouldn't see the blood of those
Yeah.
that are killed, and to that extent, I suppose, their consciences were insulated against the horror of what they were doing. But it has become more and more, as Michael D points out, the subject of science. So these wonderful scientific inventions, as he says, instead of being put to good use to transform our lives or support our lives and make things better for us, as they can do, they um, powers that be are using them to destroy people, to kill people. I've always, and he says, look at there's 200 people globally, 200 million people globally who are suffering from hunger. I've always felt that. I know you say we're on opposite sides with regard to Michael D. Higgins. Uh, I I'm of the belief that the president of Ireland is not supposed to speak out on topics political. He's supposed to be above that. Well, I tell you something, Pat. I'm glad he spoke out. I don't care whether or not
Mm.
it's within his brief. I am delighted that he spoke out. And it's
Mm.
a shame on the politicians that are supposed to be speaking out that they kept their traps shut. I mean, that's
Mm.
what must be said. The globe is insane. The world is
Yeah.
insane. 200 million people suffering from hunger, and meanwhile, $2.44 trillion are spent in the course of a year in making up ways to kill people. And as he says, the
Mm.
military industrial complex, wars are welcomed by people who've invested in weaponry. So
Yeah.
I am delighted that Michael D spoke out, and fair play to him. Now, he may have broken the rules. I don't give a damn. I think people's lives and I think justice and a picture of what's going on in the world is more important in this case than some rules that were set up about what the president of Ireland can say or cannot say.
Yeah. I remember years ago there was a Saudi billionaire called Adnan Khashoggi. And somebody said to him one time, he says, "Oh, wars are great." He says, "What do you call it?" He supplied both sides, and he became a billionaire. So, when you have 2.44 trillion spent in 2023 on arms, the American arms industry, everybody talks about the Americans, fighting these very expensive wars. What they don't say is a lot of American companies are making massive big monies out of these wars. And Jude, let's be honest, see in Libya and places like that, the gold and the oil and all the rest of it, Americans took a fair share of the stuff back to America, so there's all sorts of things going on that we know very little about. So
Yeah,
the bottom line of it, there's 200 million people today, as Michael D. Higgins is, living in poverty. And Dude, imagine what the starvation levels are like in Gaza and in places, like Yemen and so on. And yet, our friend Elon Musk could feed everybody in the world and still have a couple of 100 billion left over.
yeah, yeah. I'm sort of shocked in a way because I think if more people heard that message that Michael D made over the weekend, that there are 200 million, and let's see a few photographs of some of them, uh,
Mm.
suffering from starvation, suffering from
Yeah.
illness because of lack of food. 200
Mm.
million. And meanwhile, whatever it is, 2.3 trillion, or is it more
Yeah.
than that?
Yeah.
2.44 trillion. It's been
2.4
spent.
trillion. Yeah.
It's bloody, it literally is insane. It is
Yeah.
insane. And I think most people, certainly the people I've met, anybody, I've never met anybody who said, that's fair enough. Let's
Mm.
have 200 million people starve and let's spend $2.44 trillion on armaments. I think the great majority of people throughout the world, in Ireland, in England, in Britain, in the US, they would say, no, don't do that. That's a bad way to run the world. Would you not think so, Pat?
Yeah.
Surely the average
Sorry,
punter.
but yeah, but somewhere, the military and industrial complex, it's a very lucrative business, and Jude, some people are getting very rich. Wars make several, big corporations very wealthy. That's a fact. And I'm sure there are people, stockholders and people other who've got vested interest and so on. And let's be honest, the Americans have invaded more countries than enough in this
Oh,
last 40,
yeah.
50 years. They've been at war non-stop, Vietnam, Korea, you name it, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. They're now in Syria, but they're involved in Gaza. They just keep on going. And like somebody's making a lot of money out of this.
Oh yeah. Well, listen, Pat. It's I was saying there that it's good to hear Michael D speaking out on this, but there are politicians like Bernie Sanders and Boyd Barrett and the Dáil and others of the left who would be the first to say exactly that. You know that people are starving in the world, and meanwhile we're feeding the military industrial complex. What is it with people? Do they not hear what's being said? Or does it need to be said loudly again and again and again? What is it? If people look, does the average person know those figures that I've just given? Do they realize that there's
Uh,
hundreds of
I don't
millions
know.
debt?
Jude, Jimmy Carter was derided. Jeremy Corbyn's derided. Just to give you two examples, people who say there has to be a better way, they're considered naive fools, or useful idiots, or whatever the term you want to. Yet we've had the Putins, and we have had the George W. Bushes and all the rest of it, who are absolute clowns. They keep wars going, and so on. Maybe we should try the other alternative. Like Jeremy Corbyn or Jimmy Carter were not fools, and they were not soft, but they thought there was a better way.
Well, I think that here's the thing I think that any election, anywhere, any country, start with Ireland, start in the north, the south, in Britain, in America, at the top of the list, every politician, every political party and its manifesto should say what it's going to do to change that situation globally. It
Yeah,
might be very, very little, but they're going to do something specifically because it's an appalling thing. Why isn't it at the top of everybody's manifesto?
yeah,
Rather than just sort of, and the fact of the matter is that people, as you say, like Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn and so on, they're brushed aside as leftist loonies,
yeah.
which is disgraceful, really. The world has we've a lot to answer for when we, as they say, evil flourishes because good men or women keep silent.
Yeah.
Uh,
But there wasn't it? I think he was called Harry Patch. He was the last survivor he died there several years back of the First World War. And he said, "No, what we do, we send out the sons and daughters of the leaders who go to war first." And he says, "And let them fight." He says, "There'll be a lot less wars if they died first."
that's true. You notice Donald Trump never they go out.
Never served.
Oh, yeah, there was
No.
something wrong with his foot.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's bone
go on.
spurs.
Let's go on briefly and look at what Maureen Dowd said about Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter died, as we all know, at the
Yeah,
weekend or maybe earlier, and he was buried. His funeral was at the weekend. And
yeah,
she talks about Maureen Dowd is the writes for the New York Times, and she's obviously Irish in background. By God, she's a good
mm,
writer. She really is. She was talking about
yeah,
the difference between um, Jimmy Carter and the other people like Obama, Clinton, the Bushes, and so on. And there's a famous photograph
and
of
Trump.
them. There's a photograph,
Yeah,
Trump. There's a photograph of the present serving presidents and Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter's standing a bit away from them. And
yeah,
he looks actually a little bit lost. He
mm,
looks like a sort of an afterthought. But apparently, Maureen Dowd asked him about this in an interview, and he said that he felt superior to the others because of what he'd done since he had been president. And fair play
mm,
to him, he has done an awful lot of good in the world. He's done the reverse of what the figures are for weaponry and so on. Let us
yeah,
face it, he's done the reverse of what Joe Biden did. Joe Biden feeding the
absolutely.
weapons by hand over fist. But she suggests that while Carter is a very good man, she does say that he felt superior to them, and a lot of the presidents who served after him really got cheesed off because he appeared to be so sanctimonious and making statements that were sort of jibes at what they were up to. And she says also that Carter, he was, he really could hold a grudge against some of these people for the way
Hmm.
that they responded to him. That's never how Carter struck me, but maybe it is. Would you believe her when she says that? That, he wasn't.
Should I presume you would have a fairly healthy ego to run for the presidency of the
That's right.
United
You don't
States?
get there for
So
nothing. Yeah.
you don't get, and I don't think there's any soft. You have to take the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, as they say,
Yeah.
or as Shakespeare said, along the way, and so on. But there's a funny thing, Jude. There was the Carter Center released a photograph on Saturday of the funeral, and you can see all the former presidents in a row. Guess who is? And now, but remember, keep in mind, this was released an official photograph by the Carters. The one that's missing is Trump, and he's behind a what do you call it, a pillar in the church. It was clearly deliberate. That it was without question deliberate that they released this photograph to ensure that Trump was not in the photograph of all the former presidents, which I would presume was to send a message that Trump's values are not our values. And the other thing is, it was a bit funny. Here's Jimmy Carter, the righteous man, married to Rosalind for 75 or
77
77
years.
years,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
70, yeah, I think it was 70. I heard on TV. And monogamous, no scandals, no mistresses, no nothing. And he's standing beside a man who either that day or the next day was in court for paying hush money to a porn star to keep quiet about the fact that they had sex together. Jude, what would you say? The antithesis of one to the other was startling.
Yeah, that's exactly what the point that I was going to say Maureen Dowd makes in the
Yeah,
article. She says, here was Carter, the righteous, ascending to heaven, as Donald Trump, the felonious, ascended again to the Oval Office. Carter's passion for honesty was as ingrained as Trump's addiction to lying. And
yeah,
somewhere in the article, I think she talks about the fact that Trump was busy off with Stormy Daniels, porn
yeah.
star, while his wife was just recovering from childbirth.
I'm having the first baby.
Ah,
Yeah,
jeez, there's something kind of sickening. It's because you put those two things together. It's a bit like the 200 million people starving alongside the 2.44 trillion spent on arms. Put the two beside each other, they certainly set each other off. And the same thing with
yeah.
Trump and Carter. Okay, we've about 3 minutes left, Pat. Let's have a quick laugh at. I tell you, I don't see it as anything but a laugh, and that is Elon Musk, Steve Bannon, and
I,
Trump.
yeah.
Did you see what
I,
Bannon?
I, I,
Bannon, of course, is.
Jesus, I had to laugh when I read some of what Bannon said. Like it was like the frying pan having a go at the fire. You know, Bannon, what do you call it? He said Musk was an evil racist, shouldn't be in the White House. That he was a white South African, and they were the most racist people on earth, and he was low class, and etc. etc. And the only reason that they sucked up to him was because he gave money to the campaign. Now, I don't know what how long, I don't know what status Steve Bannon has in the incoming White House. But he said he will ensure that Musk is not up there and running come inauguration day. Over to you.
Oh, well, he'll be lucky. I think actually Bannon himself is such an appalling human being. I think it's what it reminds me of is a bag filled with ferrets and one is clawing at the other.
Yeah,
And again, as they say, sometimes when teams are playing football, could both not lose? That's what I was hoping yesterday. At both Arsenal and Man United, could they both lose? Sorry, Pat. I know you're a United fan, but that'll be my take on that. Um, anyway, it's nice to see them gouging at each other as distinct from other
yeah,
people for a change.
yeah,
Okay, Pat, I think
yeah,
that's as much wisdom as we can really give people
Ex-
today.
yeah, yeah.
Subscribe. Look at the underneath your screen. I'm speaking to our viewer. At the bottom of your screen, there's a subscribe button. Hit it, and then you'll know when we're going to be really wise again. Okay, Pat. See you next
All the
week.
best, Jude.
Not next week.
See you next.
Friday.
I'll say
Friday.
Friday.
Friday. Okay,
Friday.
all the
Bye,
best.
Jude.
Bye.
All the best, Jude.